right. Happy Friday, everybody.
Happy Friday.
And welcome to the Back Catalog Listening Party. My name is Mother Banjo, one of your hosts.
My name is Anthony Ihrig, the other host.
And today we have joining us all the way from South Minneapolis, Jeremy Messersmith.
Hello. Oh, thank you for that smattering of applause.
Well, I think Connie's joining the party earlier.
I could hear you out there, Connie.
That's right. In Richfield,
Hey.
Chris ending the week and kicking off the year-end weekend with a Minneapolis Udapils Brewing Heavenly Hefeweizen. Party on, Garth. All right.
Nice.
Well, tell us where you are tuned in from, if you're enjoying any kind of beverage or snack as we kick off a holiday weekend, or maybe continue your holiday celebrations, as it were. We are really excited because today we just discovered, Tony and I already knew this because we've been doing this for a couple years now, but that our guest also lives within a few blocks of us. So we all are in the same hood. So if you hear any air traffic, it'll travel from one mic to the other.
I hear it now. And look, our friend Joe is logging in from South Minneapolis too.
All right.
Welcome, Joe.
South
Great to have you
represent.
here. If you're new to the program, Back Catalog Listening Party, every week we meet here Fridays, 4 o'clock Central Time, and we listen to records from artists that we love, and we geek out about the recording, the songwriting, all of that kind of stuff. And it really is about the conversation. So if you're out there listening, hop in the comments, ask your questions for Jeremy or for us, and we'd love to have you to be part of the party.
For sure. And Joni, our newest Patreon supporter, joining in. Thanks, Joni. And we are excited as well. And looks like Bev as well from downtown Minneapolis with hot tea and lemons. Sounds good to me. Well, I am enjoying the latest, working on finishing off a box of wine. I don't know how old this one is, but it's a very fine vintage, I will say, and it's hitting the spot. Jeremy, what are you enjoying anything?
Yeah, I found some leftover beer from a summer party. Let's see if you can make that out. Oh, nope, it's my blur focus. It's some New Glarus.
Nice.
Ooh,
From
nice.
Wisconsin.
Spotted
Nice.
cow, yeah. So I'm gonna
Nice.
take it
Very
out.
good. Oh, I like the sound of that pour. And Tony, what are you enjoying?
I'm staying local this week with the Great Northern Porter from Summit Brewing.
Oh, that's a good one.
It's nice and seasonally dark and rich and delicious.
Well, cheers to you guys. And
Cheers.
I'm excited to have
Cheers.
you all here for the final show of 2022. And we couldn't think of a better way to end it than with our friend Jeremy Messersmith joining us. And we're going to dig back into an older record, which is what the show is all about, to a 2010 release. But before we do that, for folks, I think if you live in Minnesota or near Minnesota, I don't think you could have possibly not have heard of Jeremy Messersmith. But for those of folks who are tuned in from further afield, who might not be as familiar, Jeremy, maybe you could give a little brief 2-minute bio of like where you grew up, how you started making this kind of music, and maybe what led up to this record in particular.
Sure. Well, my name's Jeremy. I have lived in Minneapolis for like 20 years or so. I came out here for school. I studied music, and after college, I was kind of like, I don't really know what I'm doing at all. And I was working at coffee shops, and turns out there were a lot of like open mics at those coffee shops. And so I started playing at some. I studied music, and my whole like initial thing was like, I wanted to be like an electric guitarist in a cool rock band with, like cool hair and a lot of mystique and stuff. And then I found out quickly that I wasn't that great of a guitarist, and I really didn't have any mystique to speak of. So I started writing songs, and I eventually just kind of like met people. It seemed like there were a bunch of people around, at least my age, who were also playing in coffee shops and just trying to play shows. Everybody had like a hustle for, trying to get gigs and things like that. And I started writing songs and recording them on a little computer that I bought for $400 at Best Buy. And and now it's kind of just my full-time job. I just do this all the time. So that's a little bit of kind of where I come from. This album specifically is the third record that I made. I did one called The Alcatraz Kid in 2006, The Silver City in 2008, which was produced by a kind of Minneapolis all-star Dan Wilson. And then this one, The Reluctant Graveyard, which I made with Andy Thompson and I
Mm.
produced it.
Another all-star, really.
Yes, I would say so. And now I feel bad that I didn't introduce Andy as a Minneapolis all-star. Definitely is.
No, that's
in
okay.
fact, I mean, he's mostly the reason why this record sounds good, because I have no idea what I'm doing. Thankfully, he does.
Yeah. So Andy Thompson, I don't know what big project he last worked, but he's worked with a lot of big national pop names that folks would recognize, as has Dan Wilson. So you quickly fell into some of the best company to be had here in the Twin Cities. And we are really excited to share this record, The Reluctant Graveyard. Came out in 2010. And folks often ask us, like, oh, when you invite artists, like, do you pick the record for them? And I always tell people, no, we invite the artists and they get to pick the record, which I think is part of the fun. And so I'd love to know, like, why was this the record that you wanted to feature today?
Oh, sure. Well, I think because we just passed like the 10-year anniversary of it. And for that, I decided to do a reissue and release some demos and things like that. And we had a big 10-year anniversary party scheduled, and then the pandemic hit. Mm-hmm. And so we did do a party 2021, I guess. And we just called it the 10 with like a little asterisk year at anniversure release.
Asterisk, not necessarily accurate.
Yeah, I mean, in the spirit of a decade. So I had just recently listened to it. I pretty much never, unless I am trying to relearn one of my older songs that I haven't performed live in a long time. I never listened to my own records, but I had recently listened through to this one because we had to get some things remastered for vinyl and whatnot. And I remember listening to it and being like, oh, no shit, this is really good. And I don't think I would say that for maybe all of my albums. So I was like, oh, if I can tolerate this, like having people watch me while we're listening to it, this would be the album to do that.
Well, thank you for being a good sport, because I do realize that when we invite people to do this, it is kind of a special kind of torture to be asked sometimes to revisit your old records and kind of experience it in real time. But I think folks are going to be very pleased with what they hear, and I don't think I'm not worried about you, Jeremy. You're going to enjoy this.
No, and it's good to kind of keep that celebration going for like the 10-year anniversary, so we can put a cap on it here. At the end of this year.
For sure. Well, let's take a listen to some music, because that's what I know I'm itching for. So the first song you picked to feature on today's show is Dillinger Eyes. Is there anything you want to say about it before we take a listen to it?
Oh, no, let's dissect it after. Let's do it.
All right. Let's get it started, folks. This is Jeremy Messersmith, Dillinger Eyes, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Well, I found honest work, and Lord knows I tried. Well, I found honest work, and Lord knows I tried. But I robbed a bank and ran from the falls. They asked to tell her just who I was. She said, I don't know, but he had John Dillinger's eyes. And for 5 long years I was wanted by the FBI. And for 5 long years I was wanted by the FBI. And I was shooting pool at the hall, the wanted poster up on the wall. keeps it by his bed on a shelf. The one thing that he'll never tell is every day he thanks God for John Dillinger's eyes.
Yeah.
Jeremy Messersmith kicking off today's edition of Back Catalog Listening Party with Dillinger Eyes from his 2010 release, The Reluctant Graveyard. And man, that's a kicking song. That drums especially. There's a reason why we wanted to air drum the whole time. So maybe you could tell us a little bit about who's playing on this track. Sounds great.
Yeah, well, sorry, I'm a little bit stunned because it's like it's kind of like looking at pictures of you when you were younger and hotter. I was like, oh wow, we're kind of smoking on that track. That's great. So that was I'm playing bass and singing on that song, and that is Andy Thompson on drums, a producer and arranger, my kind of longtime collaborator, Minneapolis all-star musician. The guitar, which somebody asked if it was a Rickenbacker. Yeah, that's me and Andy there as babies. Somebody asked if that was a Rickenbacker, and I believe it was a Rickenbacker. I think
Good to hear,
so.
Chris.
And that's being played by Brian Ty, who did most of all of the electric guitar work on this record. I had become friends with Brian, and I was a big fan of the Hang-Ups and the Owls. I just thought were an amazing band, and he has a really interesting way of making chord riffs that nobody else can do, and it's kind of a very fun process to see him work. If I remember correctly, this was a song where I don't know how this happened, but while he was doing the electric guitar solo, his amp lit on fire. His amp caught fire in the studio.
Literally, not metaphorically, right?
Just
Like literally, like a tube, something caught on fire, and there were literally flames and smoke coming out of the side. And then we had to use another amp to finish the song, which that's never happened to me. I would have thought it was a joke or something, but
That's pretty rock and roll, though.
That is really rock and roll. That's legendary.
It's pretty rock and roll. I think maybe my friend Dan Lewan is playing acoustic guitar on that, or that might have been Andy later. But the couple things that strike me, we had said going into this, I'd pitched everybody on what if we made like a 60s rock record. I mean, to me, that's just like the biggest fountain of rock. So why don't we just do that? And what if we creatively limit ourselves to kind of that kind of a thing? And so that meant lots of very funky panning in the album. So the drums are panned to the left. Lots of reverb, things kind of spaced out a little bit more. And I do remember when we were working on this in the mixing phase of it, we couldn't ever get the tambourine loud enough. The tambourine is legit. If you listen to old Beatles albums and stuff, the tambourine is it's like 50% of the song. The volume is just tambourine. It's just how they did it. So I remember sitting there and just being like, Andy, can we just distort everything through the master? Just put on it should be dirtier, should be grittier sounding, should be breaking apart, and let's crank that tambourine.
Nice.
Yeah,
I noticed that even with the vocals sometimes we're getting really distorted, and
it's oh, sorry, go ahead.
You go ahead, Helen.
Oh, I was just gonna piggyback on that. I actually wrote down vintage throwback ? I really felt that, and the vocals sort of I know Tony was starting to talk about the vocals. I felt like those also had kind of a 60s era kind of sound, the backing vocals. Was that you?
I don't think it is. I think that's my bandmates shouting out there. So I think that's some combination of Andy. I think it's probably Andy, if I had to guess, although Brian and Dan might be in there as well. Yeah.
Nice. We've run across this multiple times over the course of the show, where sometimes when you put these creative constraints on a project, it actually opens up so many other possibilities, because otherwise it all goes too far wide and not deep enough. And man, you really just start nailing that vibe on this.
Yeah, it kind of creates like a little more of an urgency. I've made, and I would say like my album Late Stage Capitalism is kind of like a kitchen sink kind of a record, where we just like everything we can possibly throw at it, like but there is something to be said for the urgency of like a tight creative constraints to make something fun.
So did you run into situations where, someone's like, oh man, that's way too modern of an arrangement idea, or a sound, a guitar distortion? That didn't come out till 87, man.
Oh yeah.
You can't use that.
No
pedal.
guitar.
I mean, yes, there were a few things where we were like, oh, we can't do that because it's a little too out there. But I feel like we kind of relaxed it a little bit as we were in post-production, and we were just like, what's just a thing that can work here? Like we're just into that. So by the end of it, we were not purists at all about it, but that was how we started out. High, lofty ideals.
Very cool.
So with this sort of premise of having it be this sort of feel like an old rock record, did you also record it that way? Did you record, digitally? Did you do it live in the studio? How did you approach that?
We basically cheated as much as we possibly could. And that was mostly for like just budget constraints. I mean, we recorded the entire album in a weekend at the library in Northeast Minneapolis. Yeah. And I feel like a bunch of the songs we actually recorded with me late at night. It's like 11 or midnight or so. We set up a chair in the hallway outside the studio, and I played I think A Girl, a Boy in a Graveyard, and Toussaint Gray, First in Life and Death, and maybe one other one as well. So it was just kind of like, what can we do that can kind of replicate it, but there was no way we were going to record it to tape, because that was insanely expensive, and none of us knows how to cut tape. And we also didn't have like big collections of vintage gear. Like we're all like software plug-in guys for the most part, and obviously at the library they had some nice microphones and things like that. I remember buying a book called Recording the Beatles a few months before we started, which is a giant hardback tome, which Andy still has at his house, and we just kind of dove into it and looked at how they did things, and tried to emulate that with kind of like software and the gear that we had as best we could.
Well, it certainly worked. We got 2 comments, Beatles reminiscent, and Alinda says, yes, definitely an early Beatles feel to it. So
yeah,
got your money's worth on that book.
And I'm guessing were the Beatles like one of the bands you like looked up to when you started making music, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, at this point, it's like saying that you like to drink water. It's just they're just so much a part of the musical lexicon, so to speak, that you can't really get around them. The songs are just epic.
Right. And what were other things that you were like listening to growing up, or maybe when you were making this record, that you feel like might have had an influence?
Well, basically any band that started with the.
Like the band?
Yeah, the band. In particular, I really listen to a lot of the Zombies, which there's a big Zombies influence on the next track we'll listen to. But the other big one was, and this was actually mostly Brian Ty's influence on guitar, but he is a huge Kinks fan. And so anything with the Kinks. In fact, when we would have kind of creative disputes, as you do when you're trying to come up with a vibe or something, it was basically done if Brian said, "Oh, that's kind of a Kinksy thing," and then we'd be like, "Oh, well, that's it. That's okay. If the Kinks did it, then that's good enough for us."
Yeah. Excellent. Well, if you just tuned into the back catalog listening party, we're being joined by Jeremy Messersmith today. We're revisiting his 2010 release, The Reluctant Graveyard, with that great throwback vibe. And, we're going to dig also a little more into the content of the songs in this record. Obviously, the title, The Reluctant Graveyard, and this next title kind of gives it more of that spooky vibe, Organ Donor. But we'll talk a little bit about that coming up. But is there anything you want to say about this song before we take a listen?
Let it rip.
All right. This is Jeremy Messersmith, Organ Donor, here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
I was born in a mortuary full of worry, ice, water in my veins, gave my heart in the school library, never knew her name, lost my tongue in the sanctuary, heaven spare me, hands raised above my head, sent my brain to the seminary, never seen again. Swing low, gray bones. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. Left my spine at the wedding chapel, full of people, feet turning into lead. Lost a leg at the iron foundry where they found me dead. Drained my blood at the mortuary, no more worry, ice, water in my veins. Took my bones to the cemetery where they still remain. Swing low, gray bones. Don't know if I'll ever be whole again. Swing low, gray bones. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again. Swing low, gray bones. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again.
All right, Jeremy Messersmith with Organ Donor from his 2010 release, The Reluctant Graveyard, which we are revisiting today with Jeremy joining us live. And if you have any comments, thoughts, questions, share them in the comments, and we'll try and answer as many questions as we can. But my burning question is, what inspired this song in particular and the album theme in general?
I think the album theme in general, because I'm a morose individual, I guess, and I think at the time I was kind of just thinking through, the end of life or what that is, and kind of reorienting myself metaphysically, as it were. And this was a way to kind of just explore some of that. It was inspired by a bunch of different things. I remember Dan Wilson giving me a copy of the Spoon River anthology and really enjoying it. And I love the idea of, a bunch of poems about people in a town or something like that. And it kind of weaves together to form a whole. So I kind of wanted to do that. I think those are probably the biggest reasons, I would guess. For writing this song in particular, this is probably the song that is maybe my favorite off of this record. And it all started because I remember asking on Facebook. This is back when I used Facebook, and it was like, a much cooler thing then, I guess. But I was just like, hey, anybody got any song ideas? And I remember my friend Stacy Schwartz was like, write a song about zombies in love.
Nice.
And so I started writing it. I just had the line, "I was born in a mortuary." And I was like, well, maybe that's what it would be like if you were a zombie. And then I slowly just kind of started from that, and I kind of told like my own story, so to speak. So going to a seminary, I went to a Bible college here in Minneapolis. I ended up getting married, and a lot of the things that are referenced in the song are all obviously other than dying, haven't crossed that yet. So that's kind of where it happened. I remember, although I don't know if is there anything I can't talk about on this.
No.
Oh, okay.
Everything is.
Oh, it's going to be a good sentence.
Now we need to know.
We're all leaning in extra.
This was this was the first album where in the writing and the songwriting of it, I really was kind of obsessing over it, and I really worked really hard on them. But also, this was the first time that I had ever smoked weed in my life, and I felt like it kind of helped. God, did it help? I felt like it kind of gave me, I was able to kind of see the songs in a little bit of a different directions or angles or something like that. And I felt like my songwriting got kind of markedly better, at least more interesting on this album. So I remember it specifically kind of in that song. I'm also probably most proud of the bass line, which you hear in there, which I don't really play bass, but I did on this album. And that little riff, I just kind of love it. To me, it's like a spooky McCartney kind of a bass riff. And I had actually gotten a knockoff Hofner from somebody on Craigslist. I remember it was a young gentleman who was transitioning from his Beatles phase into his metal phase. So I think he was doing like a Warwick bass, and I picked that up from him for like $400. And I just tried to do like plunky, McCartney-ish kind of like melodies, but on the bass. And so I'm kind of especially proud of that.
Excellent.
Nice.
Well, so you were talking earlier about how when you were marking the 10th-ish anniversary of the release of this album, you were kind of revisiting these songs and playing them live. And also probably when you first released the record, were you playing bass on these songs, or did you bring in someone else to play bass? Or
yeah, I did play bass on kind of the shows when it first came out. And then for the reissue, I did play bass as well. But now I just have someone else play bass because every time I play it and try to sing it and play it at the same time, it's like I'm doing math problems or something while bicycling. It's a little bit like
there's a lot of rhythm in there. You got to.
If I miss one note on the bass, then I will forget everything, and that can happen.
Well, it's funny how like bass and drums and tambourine, which you're mentioning earlier, it's like you don't think that the tambourine's hard until you realize if you are the tambourine player and you mess up, it's the most obvious thing on the planet.
Yeah. I have a, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I have a friend who does a lot of, my friend Ken Chastain, does a lot of auxiliary percussion for all sorts of acts. Miley Cyrus, the Jonas Brothers. I mean, he's like an auxiliary percussionist kind of person. And he always says that when he's in the studio or in doing it, it's like he feels himself leaving his body and like watching himself. It's like a thing that you can't think about too much. It has to lie perfectly, and it's very, very difficult. So,
yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say though that the shaker or whatever there was mixed at the appropriate level on this track.
Yeah.
Good ears, Tony.
In all seriousness, though, speaking of instruments, I would love to know about the string players on this track.
Yeah, this was the first time we did have a string section, and this was before. So for years now, I've played with a group in town called the Laurels String Quartet, and they have played on kind of all of my records since then. But this was before they really existed. So I basically just cobbled together as many people as I knew that played instruments or played string instruments. So this would be my friend Dan Lewan, who is one of my bandmates now and plays guitar with me and other stuff, played cello. Andy, super producer Andy Thompson, also plays violin. And then we assembled, I think, about 4 other people, and we went to we got some free time at a studio. Andy did all the arrangements. I think there's 4, maybe 5 songs on the record that have strings, and he did all the arrangements, and we went in and recorded them. And this is actually kind of oh man, this was so brutal. Andy is a producer with Golden Ears. I'm just like a guy who writes songs and sits around and, plays a guitar and sings. So for this session, because Andy was playing violin, I had to like run the session, and the problem is there was one string player, and I don't know if they played a single note that was in tune the entire time or it was just like in passing. So I was just like, well, something sounds a little off, but I don't know enough to know, like, I don't want to single anybody out. I'd feel terrible about that. So we did the whole session, and in the room, Andy was like, oh, I think it sounds okay. And then we took it back to his studio and we listened, and we were both just like, is any of this usable at all?
Oh no.
Oh no. And we ended up it took 2 days to just like comp all of the strings to get them relatively in tune. I mean, it was absolutely brutal.
I think we have a photo here of you listening to that track.
You look very intent.
I'm dissociating.
He's like,
that's what's going on. Yeah.
You got the finger on the button. Should I tell him, or should I just
Like,
let him keep playing?
What's happening? Oh no. Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
about
Well,
right.
I have to say, masterful job then on the comping, because you
Yeah.
cannot tell at all. It sounds pretty amazing.
Thanks.
And I will say that Andy Thompson, in addition to, of course, being a great producer, as you mentioned, is a great string arranger. And, earlier we were saying superstar. I'm not joking. So I looked during the last song at his like lengthy list of artists he's worked with on projects. We're talking like Taylor Swift, someone named Taylor Swift. I don't know who that is.
Upcoming artist.
Dessa, Bell and Sebastian, Jason Mraz, past back catalog guests like New Standards. So all kinds of great acts. So pretty.
We'll make sure to link
great
to
team
him
member.
and his work in the show notes on the back catalog listening party, as well as we'll be linking to how you can get your hands on this great music. We're about the halfway mark of the show, so it's a good time to remind you that Jeremy has albums, many albums, this one included, that are available for purchase. Man, they sound so good. I was telling Jeremy before we got on that this is like a headphone record. Like, one of the reasons we started the show a couple years back now is because that there used to be moments in my life where I would spend just putting the headphones on, listening to albums intensely, listening for all the production nuances and everything like that. And there's some records that really stand out, and this is one of them. And I highly recommend that you get high resolution version of this. I know he has music on Bandcamp. It sounds like there's some CDs available as well, so you could get the high resolution digital or get the CD itself at jeremymessersmith.com. We'll also put a link to that in the show notes.
Yes. And did you say there's vinyl versions of this too?
Yeah, the 10-year reunion or reissue. Yeah, there's vinyl for that as well.
Wow. Because I will say, given the vintage feel of this record, I would imagine it's particularly great on vinyl.
Fantastic! It's great. I think it's the best. It just sounds the best. It's got that nice little warm, crackly, wobbly bounce, and it just fits it perfectly.
And the panning we were talking about, you can really hear when you're listening on the headphones. So even if you're listening, right now on on the YouTubes, if you can, stick on some headphones or some earbuds, because you'll hear more of that nuance.
Yeah, I was listening before the show, and this pass here, the second time around, I'm hearing things I didn't hear the time before. And I mean, that's the mark of really good arrangement, songwriting, production, is this has all 3 of those, and you're really going to pick it up if you get a nice pair of cans or speakers and get the high resolution file. So once again, head on over to jeremymessersmith.com and show Jeremy how much you appreciate his music.
Definitely. And if you have any comments or questions, throw them in the comments on YouTube and we'll get to them as we can. But let's dive back into some music. Next track you picked was Violet. I should say Violet. There's an exclamation.
Yeah, man. Great.
Not Violet.
Right.
No.
Violet.
Just don't ask me why. I don't know.
Is that one of those nightmares too when you have to put things in like CD titles and people and radio play and stuff like that?
Oh,
Like,
yeah. I must have thought it was just more exciting that way or something. I don't know.
well, I know we dove right in the last couple times, but is there anything you want to say before we listen to this track?
Let's get it.
All right. This is Jeremy Messersmith with Violet. Violet here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Streaks of earth matted in her hair, beaten down, but she won't scare. Blinks her eyes, battered green and blue. Ignorance can leave an orphan bruise. So get out, get out. Come on and get out. Violet, blade of grass in a raking fist, sets her jaw. No, she won't quit. She'll take the fight to streets and avenues. A little dirt can make a flower bloom. So get out, get out. Come on and get out. Violet. Ba, 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 ba,
I think that exclamation point is well deserved. Violet, yes. That was Jeremy Messersmith here on the Back Catalog Listening Party from his 2010 release, The Reluctant Graveyard, which we're revisiting today with Jeremy. And folks loving that. And Natalie noting the zombies influence. But I also was hearing some Beach Boys in there too, for sure, on those vocals. Yeah.
Yeah, that bridge is straight up Brian Wilson. So yeah.
Yeah, really, really nice. And I want to ask about the cover here, which we haven't talked about yet. But it's some great artwork.
Mm-hmm.
Who did this drawing? It's lovely.
Sure. This was an artist named Nick Schubert who did the artwork for my first 3 albums. And he was just like a person that like I used to bump into at coffee shops and things. And he was just always like making little felt creatures and things. I remember one time him telling me that he didn't have a couch, but instead he just made a gigantic stuffed octopus. And he would kind of just sleep in it, cradled in the tentacles of this giant thing. And I was just like, that tracks really. And so I asked him to do the artwork for this as well, and he said yes. And he sent over these wonderful little watercolors, these kind of these paintings really. And then I did all the kind of text work and stuff, and fumbled my way through Photoshop and got it all kind of put together into an album for him. But he's the artist. People always ask me if I did it, and I'm like, no, and no, not at all.
Now, did you send him any music to inspire him, or just the title?
I think I did for all of those early albums. I don't know if he listened to them at all. I have no idea. but it turned out he certainly created a compelling visual world. So
yeah, that's great. And if you're just listening to the show, we'll have you'll be able to see the artwork on the show notes. We archive all of our shows at backcataloglisteningparty.com, so you'll be able to find all the notes and links to some of the artists we're mentioning there as well. So really, really beautiful stuff. And well, that song, man, it's just so tuneful. Really, really great.
Well, speaking of that kind of 60s vibe, there's a lot of what kind of makes those songs when I hear it are these kind of studio production tricks and things like that. Did you actually go into the songwriting portion of it with that in mind, or did you used to play it on a guitar and sing it much differently, and then it gets rearranged in the studio? Like, what was the process from like kind of writing to production?
The process, my writing process and demoing process has pretty much always been, I just sit there and play it with an acoustic guitar and sing it. And what I've found is that either the demo needs to be completely 100% done, or it needs to be the worst sounding demo of all time. And for some reason, if I'm collaborating with other people, I just literally make it sound like the worst thing of all time. So that way nobody is attached to any production stuff at all. Mm-hmm. And then it's a thing that we can all like build together. It's just coincidental that I'm not that good at production, but I remember sending this demo to everyone and kind of having the idea for it. And I think I've tried to find it and I have not been able to dig it up, but the original demo for this, I think, is one of the worst ones that I've ever done. I'm horribly out of tune. The guitar's out of tune. The tempo is out of control. But if even through that, it's kind of compelling, then I think you've maybe got something. So all these songs really went through like a crucible of like, well, here's something. And then Andy and Brian and Dan and I all kind of just, well, why don't we just jam on it for a while and see what happens? And it was really fun to kind of create that with them. So a lot of the arrangements stuff come from them.
So that's really cool.
So did you find then, you mentioned that you're like, well, if it sounds good through this kind of like crappy demo version, then it's worth it. Were there any songs that didn't pass that test, either for you or for your collaborators?
Yeah, there were a few which did get reissued on the 10-year anniversary edition. There were a couple demos that like either just didn't fit. There was one that didn't quite fit thematically, and there was another one that was just like, oh, this song just doesn't really go anywhere, like in the way that I want it to. But it's a little quirky, so we included just my little demos for those things. But yeah, that was it for the most part.
Excellent. Well, again, if you like what you hear today, you can not only buy the record at Jeremy and LP CD versions at jeremymessersmith.com. We are also passing the hat for Minnesota Coalition for the Homeless. So Jeremy, rather than taking tips for himself, it wants it to go to supporting our local homeless population, which Jeremy was noting before he came on air. We all have lived here for quite some time, Anthony his whole life, and we've all noted that it's becoming a bigger problem than ever before. So if you want to help support that would be a wonderful thing, way to give back during this holiday season.
mnhomelesscoalition.org.
That's right. So you can throw something in there. And I think I know we have time for at least one more song here.
Oh, let's do just the one more song. I did want to mention one other thing about that song, which you may have seen me kind of like laughing and giggling over the bridge of that song. And that was because I had forgotten about the panning on the background vocals there, and it was all of a sudden I had the voice of Brian Ty singing the ba 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 just a little bit late, just dragging it like a real pro, and I'd forgotten about that. And I was filled with delight. We've developed a bunch of weird pet theories because I've had kind of the same creative crew for the last like 3 or 4 albums. And we have a bunch of kind of theories, and one of them is like the little brother theory, that in order for something to sound real, there should be like one person in the band who like maybe just isn't that great, you know? Like there should always be like what, like you can't have everybody playing at this pro level if you're doing rock and roll. Like there should be one person who's like clearly like, you know, the talented guitarist, like the older brother is the lead singer or something, and he's got the gig, he's playing bass. It's usually me, by the way. I'm the little brother, but they're there to keep it real. Like not everything should be auto-tuned to perfection. There was also there's a real miss note in Organ Donor that where I'm just singing, I'm just like that. We just kept it in because it just makes it feel more of that's how I would actually sing. I would make that mistake. So that's the thing to listen to. We tried to have things not be polished to death.
Nice.
I think that helped.
Well, it makes it more authentically 60s too, right?
Yeah.
No, that's something that's come up more than once. You know, there's kind of 2 schools. You know, people who are, you know, Steely Danning themselves into perfection, and then there's people who are just completely raw. And you know, both are valid. But it's great to hear where you're coming from on this.
Mm-hmm, for sure. Well, by the way, Steely Danning, I kind of want that to become a verb, Tony.
Yeah.
In any event, well, let's take a listen to A Girl and a Boy in a Graveyard. And is there anything you want to say about this?
Let's do it.
All right. This is Jeremy Messersmith, A Girl, a Boy, and a Graveyard here on the Back Catalog Listening Party.
Lucy takes the long way home. Meets me in a field of stone. She says I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. My body's cold, my guts are twisted steel. And I feel like I'm some kind of Frankenstein, waiting for a shock to bring me back to life. But I don't want to spend my time waiting for lightning to strike. So underneath the concrete sky, Lucy puts her hand in mine. She says life's the game we're meant to lose. Stick by me and I will stick by you. 'Cause I'm like a princess in a castle high, waiting for a kiss to bring me back to life. but I don't wanna spend my time waiting for just another guy.
Beautiful. Jeremy Messersmith, A Girl and a Boy in a Graveyard, from his 2010 release, The Reluctant Graveyard, which we have been revisiting today on the back catalog listening party with Jeremy, joining us live. And, that song is there's so much sweetness in that song, both in the melody and the lyrics, and talking about, not wanting to waste time. And as we're approaching the year end, I have to ask you, is there anything that you are particularly looking forward to? I don't know if you do resolutions, but any goals or dreams that you are looking forward to in the new year?
Oh, yeah, there's so many things. Looking forward to, I'll be working on, I'm kind of working on 2 albums at the same time at the moment. So I'm looking forward to continuing work on those. I don't know if anyone listening is a musician, but there's really, if you do music at all, there's no better way to waste your time with your friends. It's just the most fun thing there is. So,
Agreed.
yeah, I've just been writing, and I get very excited when I know I've got something good and I get to share it with my friends. So, very very excited about that. I'm excited to get my garden in this spring. Pumped about that.
I'll look for that as I walk by in the neighborhood. I'll see
Yeah.
see how those flowers are coming.
Yeah, that's
If you have
fair.
extra tomatoes, you just let me know and I'll,
Oh, man.
snag
Well,
those.
what I have extra, the squirrels tend to get. But if you can fight them off, they're yours. Gosh. I'm also engaged to get married.
Congratulations.
That'll probably be happening sometime
Cheers.
this year. Yeah. So I kind of have a lot that I'm looking forward to.
Excellent. Well, we are looking forward to hearing more music in the new year. And it's funny, speaking of more music, Chris was like, time for one more song. I don't know. How long is that last one? Do we have time for it?
It's pretty long.
Okay.
I think
So
we
you
would
know
go
what?
over, yeah.
We're going to have to encourage folks to buy this record and or
Yes.
to listen on the digital places, but get the high res files, do yourself a favor, and buy that record. And jeremymessersmith.com is where you can get it, as well as Jeremy's other fine recordings. But this one, man, what a great pick, Jeremy. This has been such a fun time and a great way to have our last episode of the year. Tony, where did the time go? I don't
know. This went really fast. Yeah, it's crazy.
And we want to thank all of you for joining us. If you're new to the show and you enjoyed it, then like it on YouTube, give it the thumbs up, and point more bots to Jeremy Messersmith, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can know about, get notified about what's coming up on the show. We do this every week, not every week with Jeremy, but every week a different guest artist to revisit old records and torture them by making them listen to their old albums. And it's always a lot of fun. And if you want to get first word about what's coming up on the show, the best way is to sign up for our Patreon. And these folks have been supporting the show. Tony and I started it in March of 2020. I wonder why. I wonder what was happening then. And we missed people and we wanted to enjoy music together. And so Tony had this brilliant idea, and then we thought we'd do it for a few weeks, and then people liked it. So they stepped up and supported it. And this is why we're continuing to do this today with Jeremy and with all these great artists. So if you join the Patreon, you will get first alert as to all what's happening on the show, including Penny, Anna, Linda, Bevan, Connie, Vaughn, Alan, Chris, Alex, Becky, Galen, Peggy, Joe, Jim, Beverly, and John, Fred, Tim, Sarah, David, Jocelyn, Court, Matt, Steve, Mark, Homestead, Pick and Parlor, Severin, Lynn, Jake, Mary, Many Tracks, Nikki, Joni, and our newest patron who came in today, David. Yay.
Hey.
And all of those folks received an invite to a special after party we're doing today. We do things like that periodically for our patrons. So if you join now in the next 5 minutes, I'll keep an eye out. I can send you a link.
Yeah, rumor
Jeremy's
has it
gonna
Jeremy
stop
might
by.
be stopping by even.
Yeah.
So-
So,
I may even unblur my background so you get an unfettered look at my
Ooh.
basement.
whoa.
Just
Whoa.
saying.
And before you go, Jeremy, what's on your shirt? You just step back so we could see it a little bit better. Some
it's
creature.
yeah, it's a lamb, creature, dog, reindeer, something.
It's like what's that test where it says something about you, what you see in the
Rorschach.
picture?
Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Rorschach test.
I see a dog, a happy dog. I don't know what that says about me. But anyway, this has been such a treat to have you here with us.
Thank you so much, Jeremy, for
Thank you.
spending this hour with us.
That's been a lot of fun.
And go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, if you like it, this will be up on YouTube to share. Also, again, you can see all the show notes and links at backcatalog.listeningparty.com, along with all our other past episodes. So you can check them out there.
Yeah, and for those Patreon supporters, we're going to go hang out now after this. But we want to thank you and really anybody who tunes in for keeping this going another year as we close out 2022. We can't say how much we appreciate your support for independent artists. I mean, it makes the world a better place. It really does. Music like Jeremy's. This keeps me going during the darkest days, and it's really because of all of you out there. This conversation that we have, this music geekery. I love it so much, and I just want to thank you all personally so much for being part of this. And thanks one more time to Jeremy. And we'll see you next year here on the Back Catalog Listening Party. Cheers.
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 Happy New Year.